All right, hi, welcome everyone. This is already the third podcast made by the FITSI. Today we're very happy that Dr. Anja Visser-Nieraeth is present to talk to us about mental health and also give some updates on what the faculty is actually doing on this team. Anja, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you for having me.
And thank you, of course, to Marleen, my other FITSI member, who will ask some questions in this podcast later on. Well, let's just start with the first question, and that's, of course, Anja, can you introduce yourself? What are you busy with? Who are you? Please tell our viewers.
Ooh, the big question, who are you?
We start difficult.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Well, let's keep it simple. So I work as an assistant professor in spiritual care at our faculty, which means that I do a lot of teaching in the pre-master and master program, spiritual care. And I also do research in this field. So my research is partly about how spiritual caregivers can work effectively in primary care, so outside of institutions where they usually work, and what the effects of spiritual care are. I'm also the coordinator of the master program Religion, Health and Wellbeing, and a lot of other things, but those are not relevant here, I think.
All right. That's pretty clear indeed. Can you tell us a little more about that research that you already introduced to us? What are you currently busy with, and what are you hoping to do in the upcoming months and years?
So currently we're finishing up a project that we started in 2019, where we examine how spiritual caregivers or chaplains or geestelijk verzorgers, these are all synonyms of the same thing, how they function in primary care and the social domain, because spiritual caregivers, they usually work in hospitals or in elderly care or in the military or in prisons or, well, in institutions. But for the past few years, more spiritual caregivers have been moving out of institutions and into the private sector, so to say, as independent workers. And but because this is a new field, it's quite difficult for them to become integrated in the care processes that happen outside of the care institutions. So we're examining how these spiritual caregivers can be supported together with their networks of other types of caregivers to, well, become more integrated into these care processes. So it's a very organizational question. It's not even really about the content of spiritual care, although that does play a role, of course. And for the upcoming years, I really want to focus on the effects of spiritual care. So I'm really curious about whether the care that spiritual caregivers provide if we can measure or find ways to make visible what it is that they mean for their clients, because they work on spirituality and religion and meaning systems and how this, I don't know, they try to do things with that. But it's quite unclear to the world and to spiritual caregivers themselves what exactly it is that they do there, and what this does in the life of the person that they are helping. My big project is to look for ways to make this more visible.
Nice. Very clear, and also very interesting. I did the minor in spiritual care myself, so this is something I will definitely look out for in the upcoming years then. Thank you so much. then I think it's good to move on to sort of the second part of the podcast, which will be about the research into the mental health of our faculty. Maybe some of the viewers know that this has been done, maybe you even participated in it, but maybe some others don't. So Anja, can you maybe tell us about what exactly has been done and why?
Yes, of course. Yeah. Well, we know that students experience a lot of stress. And we also know that the mental health of students seems to be declining, or at least is really under pressure. There have been a lot of studies about this already. And we wanted to know as a faculty, well, what can we do to support our students in maybe dealing with the inevitable pressures that they have to deal with, but also in taking some of these pressures away. So what we've done is, because of the change in the financial structure of, the governmental financial structure of study loans and stuff like that, there are these quality agreements have been made where universities get some money to improve the quality of education. And so some of this money has been used by the faculty to do this study on the mental health of our students. And what we have been doing is in 2019, Jan-Mark Mulder, who was a former spiritual care student of ours, he did literature research and made a questionnaire to try to find out how much stress our students experience and what might be the most important factors that contribute to this experience of stress. We know that there are systematic factors like, well, the expectations that society has about, the sorts of jobs that we have and how we perform and all those things. There are interpersonal issues that could contribute to stress, like worry about family members or, having to take care of others, or a lot of different factors. And of course, then there are the personal factors that could contribute. The expectations that you have of yourself. Maybe you're very perfectionistic, or I don't know, you want that beautiful shiny career, or you're just a bit insecure about yourself. There could be a million things. So we were curious of all those factors that we found in the literature that could contribute, which ones seem to be most important to our students, and also what is the role of meaning here? I mean, we are the Faculty of Theology and Religious Studies, so we can't just ignore this dimension of our lives. And that had never been examined before. So we wanted to know, does meaning, I don't know, do the students who experience more meaning in their studies, do they maybe experience less stress, or is this helping them to sort of buffer the effects of what they are experiencing? What are they telling us about this? But then Corona hit. So we were already, Jan-Mark had made a beautiful questionnaire, and we were all set to start our study. And then we were all placed in lockdown. So we felt it was a bit pointless to ask people how stressed they were, because it was pretty clear they were really stressed. So we decided to postpone the study. But by the end of last year, of 2020, we felt, well, the situation had been stabilized enough, and people had adjusted quite well to the experience. So, well, we could try again and see, how does this, how is everyone doing, and can we figure out how to support people in their usual experience of study stress, so to say. So not especially the corona related stress, but stress related to their their studies, to their education. Unfortunately, Jan Mark wasn't available anymore, so a new person stepped in, Gerhanne van Dijk. She adjusted the questionnaire a bit, so we did ask about, well, what's the role of the COVID pandemic in your experience of stress, so we could control for that. And then we asked the students to fill out the questionnaire, and 100 students responded, so we were quite happy with the response rate. So we could get a bit of a reliable idea of going on there. Unfortunately, very few international students participated, so we're not quite sure about the situation there, although we know from other studies that they usually experience more stress than the Dutch-speaking students. So we got the questionnaires, and then we performed 4 focus groups to talk with the students a bit more about, well, how do they try to deal with the stress they experience? What do they think is most important, to get a bit more context to our questionnaire. And also to learn a bit more about what strategies they already use to deal with stress, and so what might be the things that we could sort of enhance or support them with further. So that was the setup of the study, and I think 20 people participated in the focus group. So we had a really nice group of people who could help us make sense of the situation. And of course, now you want to know what we found.
Yeah, definitely. That was going to be the next question, of course. I'm very curious, what came out of all of this?
So that it was quite a puzzle still to sort of understand what was underlying what we found, but ultimately we arrived at 3 main themes. So we found out that a lot of students were speaking about the things around purpose. So they expressed that, especially for religious studies, it was sometimes a bit unclear to them what they were studying. They were very highly motivated to do this. They also found it really interesting. But, what's the job perspective? How do you explain to people around you what you're studying and why that is relevant? That on the one hand helped them experience less stress. So this intrinsic motivation, this feeling that what I'm doing is useful and it's relevant to myself and to society, was really important. But at the same time, if you couldn't articulate this, if you weren't sure how to talk about what this meant to you, what the purpose of you studying this was, that could be quite stressful. Also to yourself, that you felt a bit lost, well, what am I doing and why? So this seemed to be an important theme. Another important theme seemed to be busyness. We have a culture in which being busy is highly valued. So students, feel pressure to do a lot of things, not just their studies, but also all sorts of committees, as you're doing right now, and jobs and all sorts of extra stuff, which puts, of course, a lot of pressure on your time. You have limited time and energy. And so feeling the need and the desire to do all of those things, because, of course, it's also really enriching. Well, that's also very stressful. And some students also expressed that, it's a culture outside of the university, but it's also a culture inside of the university. So they also felt that, the lecturers and the support staff, everyone is super busy.
Yeah.
And so, there's this constant feeling that you have to keep working and work hard, and that, if you work hard and do a lot of things, this is also the way to become successful. And it also takes away a bit of the freedom, perhaps, of students to ask for help, because everyone is super busy and you don't want to, add another thing to the workload of a lecturer or support staff. So that seems to create a lot of tension, that on the one hand, you put a lot of pressure on yourself to do more than you might actually be able to handle. And it's difficult to ask for help because most people seem to be doing more than they can actually handle. So there's this pressure between, this extrinsic push to keep working and working and working, and not being supported enough to say, well, no, maybe this is not that important to me. Let's not do this, or find help to take a bit of the pressure off. And the final theme that seemed to be really important is the theme of embeddedness or connectedness. And this was also really obvious in relation to COVID. So around COVID, the students said, well, the thing that I find most stressful about this is that I'm isolated. I don't get to meet with, my fellow students who are going through the same thing, who are asking the same questions, who are studying the same topics. And so I feel a bit lost. And that sense of community, of working on the same goals and topics together, I'm a bit losing that a bit. And this is also the theme that it was most strong among the few internationals who participated, that they also felt lost. I mean, COVID made this even worse, but even before COVID, feeling at home in this place where, well, you're new and you have to perform a lot. That was quite difficult. So these three things of purpose, busyness, and embeddedness or connection, these seem to be the most important topics that, on the one hand, helped to deal with stress, but on the other hand, also gave more stress.
Yeah, I think if I speak for myself and maybe also for Marleen, is that these three themes are quite recognizable. So
very familiar.
Yeah. So the next question is, of course, what's next? So what's going to happen with the results, and are there any things happening already?
Well, there are things happening already. You, Ilse, have been very involved also, throughout our study. You've participated in some of the focus groups as well. So you've already also taken up some of the findings, especially around connection and creating this sense of community. And this has been, for the faculty as a whole, a topic that we've been working on a lot the past year, especially because of COVID, but I think also more generally that we feel that this is really important to sort of share this community. So this is a big theme that's already been taken up. And another theme that's already been taken up as well by the faculty is the issue of busyness, of work pressure, of everyone working so hard. It's also a national discussion at the moment. Should we be doing all of these things, and how can we change the system so that there's a bit less pressure on everyone? But it is also very much a question of the system. So there's not a whole lot that we can do as a faculty to to reduce this busyness. But it is definitely something that's being explored faculty-wide more in the upcoming years as well, how we can deal with those. And I think for us, the most important thing to do now is to look into, well, how can we take up the things that the students mentioned, and how can we make this, put this into a form that can really benefit them. So I think that over the next, few months or year, maybe even, we will have several discussions and talks with the students as well about, well, this is what we found. What do you think would be good ways to address these issues? I mean, one of the examples that were mentioned in the focus groups, well, could we have an introductory module into religious studies with alumni, and talk about what is this field and how could I position myself in this? But we as researchers, Hanneke Mutet, who coordinated this study with me, and Gerhanne van Dijk, who executed the study, we do feel that such a module might ask a bit more than just, here's what religious studies is. These are the disciplines that are involved and the methods that we use, and those sorts of questions. It might be more a question of what are the key questions that we ask in these, in theology, in religious studies, and how do they relate to my own life? And why am I interested in these questions, and what would I like to do with these questions? So to focus more on how am I as a person involved in this, than the technicalities of the discipline. So these are lines that I think we could explore very well with the students to figure out, might this meet their needs?
Yeah, I think students would be interested in thinking along those lines, definitely. Yeah, this is very interesting, and it's always good to really have that information again, that you actually have something concrete to act on. So that's very great that the research is done, I think. So thank you very much for doing that, of course. If you have no more specific things to say about the research, I want to give the word to Marleen, but first I want to check that. Do you want to add anything on this theme?
No, I think I addressed the most important things. We're really grateful that all these students participated in the study as well, because without them we would still be left with nothing.
True.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, thank you a lot. Then I want to give the word to Marleen. So Marleen, on to you.
Yes, thank you, Ilse. And I also want to say that the fact that this study is actually already conducted is already very nice for the students, that there is attention for the stress and the mental health.
Maybe I could add just that the faculty does intend to do this evaluation regularly. So every couple of years to have another look at how things are going, so that we can also sort of monitor if the things that we change are helping.
Exactly.
And if we're doing the right things, or if we should do something else. Yeah.
Yeah, very nice. Before we move on to the next part, I have 2 more questions about the about the research. First, did the results match your expectations or your initial hypothesis, so to say?
Yeah, I think so. What we knew from the previous studies was that this achievement society, prestatiemaatschappij, that you have to really you have to achieve a lot, and it's your own responsibility to achieve these things. It's not coincidence, it's not help. No, it's all you who has to do all these things. That that contributes a lot to the experience of stress by students, and that was confirmed in our study as well, that the items that related to those issues were ticked most often by the participants. And I think that, we were also confirmed in our suspicion that this sense of meaning, that you feel a connection to the community, to the thing that you are studying, that's also very important. This theme of purpose is also really about, is it important to me and to society? Is it addressing values, things that I value, that are, and if it doesn't, then, I'm not really sure what I'm doing here and why I should be doing this. And so everything that is asked of me gives me extra stress. That was also found, that students, especially in the focus groups, we heard a lot of comments that related to that. Yeah. So we weren't super surprised about what came out. No.
No. And do you feel like that this thing of meaning and finding purpose is something that's really, you say, inherent to our faculty, because it's quite relevant also in, of course, what we study? Or do you feel like this can probably also apply to other faculties and other studies?
Well, I think it can also apply to other faculties and other studies. I do think that at our faculty, it's maybe more obvious because, we study meaning. So everything we do is about meaning, in the sort of, meaning of life kind of sense. Because of course there are also different types of meaning, like semantic meaning. If you were going to study linguistics, it's also all about meaning, but a different type of meaning. But I think that, I don't know, originally, of course, the university also had a large responsibility, or sense of responsibility, at least. I don't know if they were really, for what's called Bildung. So the personal development of people, of citizens and good citizens, and righteous kind of people. So I do think that, and that makes sense, because you're in a stage in your lives when you go to university where you are really thinking about all of these questions. Who am I as a person? What do I find important in life? Where would I like to go? How can I, build a life that I think is good? And you're studying the world. You're meeting the world at the university. You're studying it. You're studying or parts of it. So it makes sense that these questions, that when you're studying, you're also thinking about, okay, how does what I'm studying and why I am studying this, how does this relate to what I want with life, and how will this enrich my life? So I think that for, no matter what you study, this is always a relevant question.
Yeah, that makes sense. It does make me think of a career service we did in the beginning of last year, I think. We focused on self-development, and then we were also asked to pick 3 of the most important things to us about why we studied it or what we wanted to do with it in the future. I'm not sure what it was, but there were a lot of similarities among the students from our faculty, that we want to have a good balance between work and private life, for example, and things like that. But the person, it was another student who taught us this short course. And she was so surprised. She was from I'm not sure which faculty, something with business and economics, I think.
from economics. Yeah.
Yeah, she was so surprised because like most of the students from her studies picked completely different things. Like they found status, I think, very important, money very important, for example, and that was among the least important things within our faculty. So it was interesting.
I can
to
imagine.
see.
Yeah. I think your study should match your values. I mean, that's what makes a study interesting, and makes you want to engage with all this material that's hard and that asks a lot of you. It's really, I mean, studying is really challenging in many ways. So to persevere as well in your studies, you really need to have this intrinsic motivation. It needs to match what you find worthy of achieving or striving toward.
Yeah, definitely. All right. I think enough about the research, because we have another very interesting development, I think, because you are involved in the development of a new master track. Yeah, what is this master track? Could you tell us something more about that?
So it's super related to what we were just talking about. Because it's a track about work and meaning, Werk and Zingeving. It's a Dutch track, so we tend to use the Dutch name, but I will use the English imperfect translation now. And it's about these questions. So what does work mean to people? Track, how does the way we have organized work, how does that influence the position that work takes in our lives, the meaning that we can or cannot derive from it, how that influences our health and our well-being, how we can support people in thinking about meaning in work, in their own work and the work of the people that they employ, and how can we, if relevant, help people to find meaning in their work again, or find it elsewhere if work is not the place to look for meaning.
Interesting, I think. Can you tell us a bit more about, if you, I don't know, because this will already start next year, right? Can you tell us a little bit of like what courses it consists of, or internships, or?
Yeah, definitely. So we're starting in September. Super exciting. The courses will be focused on three main sets of competencies. Of course, we have the academic competencies. We're studying at a university. We need to think, critically about theories about work and be able to develop new theories about it, and ask good research questions and conduct good research and write well and present well about all those things. So of course, that's an important part of the program. But we also want to focus on more professional skills, because what we want to, when the students graduate, what we want them to be able to do is to work in an organization, middle, large to large organizations, probably not really small ones, both in the nonprofit and the profit sector. And be able to work both on a policy level, so analyzing and advising boards about, what's going on in terms of meaning in your company, and what can you do to work on this, both to the outside world, right? Show your societal contribution or relevance, and think about that deliberately, and internally. So, how do the processes in your organization contribute to a sense of meaning and well-being in your organization? So we want people to be able to work on this policy level. So that means that they will have to have, professional skills in this policy domain, being able to talk with the CEOs and other sorts of leaders, and help them think strategically about their organization. But we also want these people to be able to support staff. So we want our students to be able to talk with employees about their sense of meaning in their work and what contributes to this and what reduces their sense of meaning, and to support them in developing this, and also on team level. So, be able to work with groups as well. So there are a lot of professional skills that we want our students to develop in this program. And then there's, of course, the self-reflection, because you cannot talk about meaning in life and in work with other people if you have no idea of your own sense of meaning in life and in work. So there will also be quite some self-reflection on, okay, so, how do I position myself? How do I position myself also in relation to the people that I'm talking with? And to really reflect on your personal processes as well. It's really difficult to talk with someone about very sensitive topics, if you're not aware of, what your own emotional responses to this as well, to sort of, make sure you don't transfer your own discomforts or problems or whatever to the person you're talking to. So yeah, the courses will really focus on these three levels, on the personal development of the student, on the professional development, and on this academic development. Yeah.
Well, as a student, I can say very, very interesting to learn about this, also develop yourself in these different levels. I think we're almost at the end, but could you tell us a bit more about the reason that this master track was developed, the relevance of it?
Well, the reason, it was kind of similar to why we did the study on student stress. It's that, we find that in society as a whole, well-being at work is really under pressure. People experience lots of burnouts or other sorts of mental health problems related to their work environment. And we also see that work is taking a much more central place in our lives. So work is becoming sort of the focal point of where we derive a sense of purpose and meaning and satisfaction in our lives, much more than family or, hobbies or, I don't know, all sorts of other things that you could do with your time. So there are these societal trends that really make it important to reflect upon what does this mean, that work is so important, and what does this do to our lives, how we live, how we feel, how we function. And you also see this happening in companies that they start all sorts of programs to support their staff in, feeling happy in work, or reducing, finding more balance between work and private life, because work is sort of encroaching on private life. So there's a big demand, I think, in society. There's a big demand for a much more systematic look at how we deal with work, and how we might, how this affects our lives and our well-being, and how we might change work, or I don't know, maybe we don't have to change work, but at least think about whether we have to change work to stay healthy and happy or sane.
Or sane. Well, I think that is a nice goal to work towards. For my last question, I believe there was also a spring event for this master track. Am I correct?
Yeah, so what we're going to do in May, the May 25th to 28th, is we're going to have 4 half days, so 3 afternoons and 1 morning, where we're going to do an introduction into the main topics of this master track. So we'll have an afternoon on the development of work, how work is organized. We'll have an afternoon on meaning. What is it? Why would you expect to talk about meaning at work? We'll have an afternoon where we relate meaning to leadership and to happiness. So leadership is also an important topic in the master track. So we'll talk about that, and we'll have a morning with Manuela Kalski about inclusion and diversity, and how this affects, how we organize teams and how we feel about ourselves at work. So you can all sign up, do
Yes.
that.
I was just going to say to our viewers and listeners, if this all sounds interesting to you, please go there. We'll also add the links to this event and also to more information about the master track in the bio below. So please check that out. It sounds really interesting. So before we end this podcast, do you have anything else you want to add, Anja?
No, it was a lot of fun to talk about these things. I could talk about them for another day, probably. No, I think I just want to say thank you for taking the time for addressing these topics in your podcast. Yeah, I hope. I'm really happy that at the faculty at large we're starting to pay more attention to these topics of meaning and stress and how we work and how we organize things.
Yeah.
Yeah, both for ourselves and for other people.
Yeah, me too. I think it's, of course, all very important. And well, thank you very much for being here and wanting to share all this information with us. I think, well, personally, we both are very interested in this, but I think actually a lot of the students within the faculty love to hear about this, about the research done and about the master track. So thank you very much for being here. And also, Emile, thank you for recording this. And yeah, I'm looking forward to the final results. And again, for our viewers, also thanks for listening to this podcast, and please check out the links in the bio. And we'll see you next time.